His name was Alex James. He was 28 years old, and the night his wife abandoned him at a gas station in the rain, with their 6-month-old daughter crying in his arms, was the night he stopped believing in forever. It was late November 2019, around 9 p.m. on a Thursday. Alex had been working double shifts as an assistant manager at a distribution warehouse, pulling in about $48,000 a year. Not much for a family of 3 in Seattle, but he'd been making it work. His wife, Vanessa, had always wanted more. More money, more attention, more of the glamorous life she'd scrolled through on social media while he worked 60-hour weeks to keep their modest apartment in Renton. The gas station was a BP off Highway 167, one of those bright fluorescent islands in the darkness where Alex had stopped to fill up their aging Honda Accord. Vanessa had been silent the entire drive home from her mother's house, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. Their daughter Emma had been fussing in her car seat, and Alex remembered feeling that familiar knot of exhaustion in his chest. He'd worked a morning shift, grabbed 3 hours of sleep, then driven across town to pick them up because Vanessa had claimed their car was acting up again. He'd gone inside to pay for the gas and grab a bottle of water. When he came back out 2 minutes later, the Accord was gone. At first, he'd thought he was confused about where he'd parked. He walked around the pumps twice, Emma still strapped to his chest in her carrier, her small fists clutching his jacket. Then his phone buzzed. The text from Vanessa was short. "I can't do this anymore. She's your problem now. Don't try to find me." Alex had stood there in the rain, watching the message on his cracked phone screen, his mind unable to process what was happening. His wife, the woman he'd married 3 years ago in a ceremony at the Woodland Park Rose Garden, the woman who'd promised to love him through everything, had just driven away and left him stranded with their baby. He'd called her 17 times that night. Every call went straight to voicemail. What Alex didn't know then, as he'd stood there in that gas station parking lot feeling his entire world collapse, was that Vanessa had been planning her exit for months. She'd already moved most of her important belongings to her new boyfriend's apartment in Bellevue. A tech executive named Bradley Westmore, who drove a Tesla Model S and lived in a penthouse with a view of Lake Washington. Bradley was 42, divorced, and had made it clear he wasn't interested in playing stepfather to another man's child. So Vanessa had made her choice. Alex had eventually called his older sister, June, who'd driven out to get him at midnight. She'd helped him file a missing persons report that went nowhere because Vanessa wasn't actually missing. She just left. The police officer who'd taken the report had looked at Alex with something close to pity and told him to get a lawyer. If you enjoy stories of shocking betrayals and the sweet revenge that follows, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one. And tell me where you are watching from. The first 6 months after that night were the darkest of Alex's life. He'd been completely unprepared to be a single father. His sister helped when she could, but she had 2 kids of her own and worked full-time as a dental hygienist. Alex had to cut his hours at the warehouse, which meant his already tight budget became impossible. He'd burned through his meager savings of $3,200 in the first 2 months, just trying to keep up with rent and childcare. He'd tried to track Vanessa down, if only to get child support, but she'd disappeared completely. Her phone number was disconnected. Her mother claimed she didn't know where Vanessa had gone, though Alex suspected that was a lie. Her social media accounts went dark. It was as if she'd simply erased herself from their lives. The divorce papers had arrived 4 months later, delivered to his apartment by a process server. Vanessa was filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences and was making no claim for custody or visitation. She also wasn't offering any child support. The papers had been filed to a law firm in Portland, Oregon, which told Alex she'd probably left the state entirely. He'd signed them. What choice did he have? By month 7, Alex had been served an eviction notice. He couldn't keep up with the rent, couldn't work enough hours to cover childcare and living expenses, and he'd made the painful decision to move back into his mother's basement in Tacoma. It felt like failure. At 29 years old, he was divorced, broke, living with his mom, and solely responsible for a baby daughter who deserved so much better than what he could provide. But here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. Sometimes it's exactly where you need to be to start building something real. Alex's mother, Linda, was a retired high school math teacher who'd raised Alex and his sister alone after their father died when Alex was 12. She was tough, practical, and fiercely protective of her grandchildren. She didn't judge Alex for his situation. She just rolled up her sleeves and helped. Living rent-free in his mother's basement gave Alex the breathing room he desperately needed. He could work his warehouse shifts knowing Emma was with her grandmother. He could sleep more than 3 hours at a time. He could think clearly for the first time since that night at the gas station. And slowly, carefully, he began to plan his future. Alex had always been good with logistics. It's why he'd risen to assistant manager at the warehouse, despite being younger than most of his colleagues. He understood systems, workflows, how to make complicated operations run smoothly. Now he applied that same strategic thinking to his own life. First, he started taking online courses in supply chain management. He'd wake up at 5 a.m., study for 2 hours before Emma woke up, work his shift, then study for another hour after putting her to bed. It was exhausting, but it was also purpose. He finished a certification program in 6 months that was designed to take a year. Second, he documented everything. Every text from Vanessa, the few he'd received before she disappeared. Every attempt to contact her, every expense for Emma, every milestone his daughter reached without her mother. He kept it all in a cloud folder, meticulously organized. He didn't know if he'd ever need it, but something told him to keep records. Third, and most importantly, he poured everything he had into being the father Emma deserved. He learned to do her hair in the perfect pigtails by watching YouTube videos at midnight. He became an expert at reading picture books with different voices for every character. He took her to the park every Sunday, even when he was bone-tired from work. He showed up to every pediatrician appointment with a list of questions written in a notebook. He made sure she knew, every single day, that she was loved completely and unconditionally. Emma thrived. She was a happy, curious toddler who called Alex's mother Nana and had no memory of the woman who'd abandoned her. Sometimes Alex would look at his daughter's bright smile and feel a fierce, protective rage at Vanessa for walking away from something so precious. But mostly, he just felt grateful that he got to be Emma's father. By the time Emma turned 2, Alex had landed a better job as a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized manufacturing company in Tacoma. The pay was $62,000 a year, a significant jump that made him feel like he could finally breathe. He started saving money for the first time in years. When Emma turned 3, Alex met Rachel. She was a software developer at a tech company downtown, and they'd met at a parent and child music class at the community center. Rachel was there with her nephew, filling in for her sister, who was out of town. She'd made a joke about being completely tone-deaf. Emma had giggled, and Alex had found himself smiling for the first time in months. They'd started talking after class. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into regular weekend plans. Rachel met Emma early on. Alex had made it clear that he and his daughter were a package deal, and she'd handled it with an ease that amazed him. She didn't try to replace Emma's mother or rush into anything. She just showed up consistently, kindly, and let the relationship develop naturally. What Alex appreciated most about Rachel was her pragmatism. She was 31, had built a successful career, owned her own condo and University Place, and had zero interest in drama or games. She'd been clear from the start about what she wanted: a partner who was honest, a relationship built on mutual respect, and eventually a family of her own. They dated for 18 months before Alex proposed. It was nothing fancy, just the two of them and Emma at Point Defiance Park, watching the sunset over the Puget Sound. Rachel had said yes before he'd even finished asking. They'd married in a small ceremony 6 months later, in August 2023. Emma, now 4 years old, had been their flower girl, scattering rose petals with serious concentration while guests had laughed and taken pictures. Alex's life had transformed so completely that sometimes he could barely recognize the broken man who'd stood in that gas station parking lot. He had a wife who loved him and treated Emma like her own daughter. He had a good job with room to grow. He'd recently been promoted to senior logistics manager with a salary of $78,000. He and Rachel had bought a modest house in Spanaway, nothing extravagant, but it was theirs. Emma was enrolled in a good preschool and was already reading simple books. He'd built a real life from the ashes of his worst moment. And then, in October 2024, Vanessa came back. The private investigator had found Alex through his mother's address. Apparently, Vanessa had hired someone to track him down. The PI had shown up at Alex's workplace on a Wednesday afternoon, handed him a business card, and told him that Vanessa James wanted to arrange a meeting. Alex had stood there in his office, holding that card, feeling a cold rush of adrenaline he hadn't experienced in years. "Why?" he'd asked. The investigator had shrugged. "Not my business to know. She just asked me to make contact and see if you'd be willing to meet." Alex had gone home that night and told Rachel everything. They'd sat at their kitchen table while Emma played with blocks in the living room, and he'd shown her the business card with a phone number scrawled on the back. "What do you want to do?" Rachel had asked. "I don't know," Alex had admitted. "Part of me wants to tell her to go to hell. She doesn't get to just waltz back into our lives after 5 years. But another part of you wants to know why she left," Rachel had said quietly. Alex had nodded. That was exactly it. For 5 years, he'd carried the weight of not understanding. Why had Vanessa abandoned them? What had he done wrong? Had she ever loved Emma at all? The questions had haunted him during sleepless nights, even as he'd built his new life. "You should meet with her," Rachel had said. "Not for her sake, for yours. You deserve answers." So Alex had called the number on the card. Vanessa's voice had been exactly as he remembered it, smooth, confident, with that slight uptick at the end of her sentences that made everything sound like a question. They'd arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Federal Way, neutral territory, on a Saturday afternoon when Rachel could watch Emma. Alex had arrived 15 minutes early and ordered a black coffee he didn't drink. He'd sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, watching the door with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Vanessa had walked in at exactly 2 p.m. She looked different. Older, obviously, they both were, but also worn down in a way that surprised him. Her hair was shorter, her clothes were nice but not as designer as they used to be, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She'd spotted him immediately and had walked over with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Alex," she'd said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Thank you for meeting me." "Vanessa." His voice had been level, controlled. He'd had 5 years to prepare for this moment in his head, though none of his imagined scenarios quite matched the reality of sitting across from the woman who'd destroyed his life. They'd sat in awkward silence for a moment before Vanessa had launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "I know I owe you an explanation," she'd begun. "I know what I did was unforgivable. I was in a dark place back then, and I made terrible choices. I was young and stupid, and I thought I wanted something different than what we had. I thought Bradley could give me the life I deserved, and I was wrong." "Where have you been for 5 years?" Alex had asked, cutting through her prepared remarks. Vanessa had faltered. "Portland, mostly. Things with Bradley didn't work out. He wasn't who I thought he was." Alex had waited, letting the silence stretch. He'd learned a lot about negotiation and leverage in his logistics career. Sometimes the best move was to say nothing and let the other person fill the void. "I made mistakes," Vanessa had continued, her voice taking on a slightly desperate edge. "Huge mistakes. But I've changed, Alex. I've had a lot of time to think about what I threw away, about our daughter." That's when Alex's blood had run cold. "Her name is Emma," he'd said quietly. You don't get to call her our daughter when you haven't seen her in 5 years. Vanessa's eyes had filled with tears. I know, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to try to make things right. I want to be part of Emma's life again. I want to be her mother. Alex had felt a white-hot rage rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Why now? Why after 5 years? Vanessa had looked down at her coffee cup. Because I realized what I lost. Because I'm in a better place now, and I'm ready to be the mother she deserves. What she hadn't said, but what Alex had already guessed, was that things had fallen apart for her. Bradley had probably dumped her. Her dreams of an easy, wealthy life had probably evaporated. And now she was back, hoping to reclaim the family she'd thrown away like garbage at a gas station. They had no idea what was coming. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Alex should do next. Alex had left that coffee shop meeting without giving Vanessa any commitments. He'd told her he needed time to think, which was partially true. What he really needed was time to consult with the attorney he'd already called on his way to the meeting. Because here's what Vanessa didn't know. Alex had spent 5 years documenting everything. Every milestone Emma had reached without her mother. Every expense he'd covered alone. Every night he'd stayed up with a sick child while Vanessa was out living her best life somewhere. He had records of every attempt to contact her, every unanswered call, every ignored email. He'd also discovered something interesting through his attorney. In Washington state, when a parent abandons their child for an extended period and makes no attempt to maintain a relationship or provide support, they can lose their parental rights. Vanessa hadn't just left Emma, she'd legally abandoned her. She'd signed divorce papers that waived all custody and visitation. She'd never paid a dime of child support. She'd never sent a birthday card or a Christmas present. She'd never even asked how Emma was doing. For 5 years, Vanessa had been a ghost, and now she wanted to resurrect herself and play mother. Alex's attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Wong, who specialized in family law, had been clear about the situation. She has virtually no legal standing, Patricia had explained during their consultation. She voluntarily terminated her custodial rights in the divorce. She's made no support payments and no contact. You have 5 years of evidence showing complete abandonment. If she tries to petition for custody or visitation, we can fight it, and we'd likely win. But can she try? Alex had asked. Anyone can petition the court, Patricia had said. Whether they'll succeed is another matter. My bigger concern is whether you want her to have any access to Emma at all. That's a decision only you can make. Alex had thought about it for days. He'd talked to Rachel, to his mother, to his sister. He'd lain awake at night thinking about what was best for Emma, and he'd come to a conclusion. Vanessa didn't deserve to be Emma's mother. She'd walked away when things got hard. She'd chosen her own comfort over her child's well-being. She'd proven, through 5 years of absence, that she wasn't capable of the kind of unconditional love a child needed. But more than that, Alex realized he didn't want Emma to grow up wondering about her biological mother, building fantasies about who Vanessa might be. He wanted Emma to see exactly who her mother was, and then choose for herself. So Alex had called Vanessa back and arranged another meeting. This time, he'd brought Rachel. Vanessa had looked surprised when they'd both walked into the coffee shop, but she'd hidden it quickly behind a polite smile. "This is my wife, Rachel," Alex had said, and he'd watched Vanessa's face carefully for the reaction. There it was, a flash of something. Jealousy? Regret? He couldn't quite tell. "It's nice to meet you," Rachel had said smoothly, extending her hand. She'd worn her favorite blazer, the navy one she wore to important work meetings, and Alex knew it was intentional. Rachel wanted Vanessa to see exactly what Alex had built without her. They'd sat down, and Alex had laid out his terms. "If you want to meet Emma, we can arrange supervised visits," he'd said. "Short ones, at first. We'll explain to her that you're her biological mother, but we'll also be honest about the fact that you've been absent from her life. Whether this relationship continues depends entirely on Emma's comfort level and what my attorney approves. Vanessa had looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Alex's expression must have warned her not to. These visits will be on my schedule, at my convenience, he'd continued. You will not show up unannounced at our home or Emma's school. You will not make promises you can't keep. And if at any point Emma says she doesn't want to see you, that's the end of it. That's not fair, Vanessa had protested. She's my daughter too. No, Alex had said, his voice like steel. She's my daughter. You gave up that right when you left her at a gas station in the rain. This is the only offer you're going to get, Vanessa. Take it or leave it. What happened next shocked everyone. Vanessa had taken the deal, though Alex could see the resentment simmering behind her eyes. They'd scheduled the first visit for a Saturday morning at a park near Alex's house. Public, controlled, with Alex and Rachel both present. Alex had spent the night before trying to figure out how to explain the situation to Emma. How did you tell a 5-year-old that her mother, who she'd never known existed beyond vague explanations about some mommies not being able to stay, was suddenly coming back? He and Rachel had sat Emma down on Friday evening, in the living room of their modest house. Emma had been playing with her favorite stuffed rabbit, a worn pink thing she'd named Mr. Hopscotch. Sweetheart, Alex had begun carefully, we need to talk to you about something important. Emma had looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes that made his heart ache. She had his dark hair and his serious expression, but her smile was all her own, bright and uninhibited in a way Alex had never been. Am I in trouble? She'd asked, and Rachel had laughed softly. No, baby, you're not in trouble, but tomorrow we're going to meet someone special. Someone who was part of your life a long time ago. They'd explained it as gently as they could, that before Rachel, before their house in Spanaway, Alex had been married to someone else, that Emma had been born from that marriage, that her biological mother had made some very hard choices when Emma was a baby, choices that meant she hadn't been able to be Emma's mommy, but now she wanted to meet Emma. Emma had processed this with the remarkable pragmatism of children. So I have 2 mommies? Like Aiden at school? Not exactly, Rachel had said carefully. I'm your mom. The person we're meeting tomorrow, she's your birth mother. But families can look lots of different ways, and what matters is who shows up and loves you. Will she love me? Emma had asked, and Alex had felt his chest tighten. I don't know, sweetheart, he'd said honestly, but I know your mom and I love you more than anything in the world, and nothing that happens tomorrow will ever change that. Emma had seemed satisfied with that answer and had gone back to playing with Mr. Hopscotch, but Alex had seen Rachel wipe tears from her eyes when Emma wasn't looking. Saturday morning had arrived with that peculiar Pacific Northwest weather, cold but clear, the kind of day where you could see Mount Rainier perfectly from certain angles. Alex had driven them to Point Defiance Park, to a playground area he'd scouted out earlier that week. He wanted Emma to have familiar equipment nearby, something to do if the conversation got awkward. Vanessa had arrived 10 minutes late, driving a Honda CR-V that had seen better days, a far cry from the Tesla she'd probably imagined she'd be driving when she'd run off with Bradley. She dressed carefully, Alex noticed. Nice jeans, a cream-colored sweater, hairstyled. She was trying to make a good impression. Emma had been playing on the swings when Vanessa approached. Alex had pointed her out. That's her, the woman in the cream sweater, and watched his daughter's reaction carefully. Emma had looked at Vanessa with curious but cautious eyes. Children have good instincts about people, and Emma was no exception. Hi, Emma, Vanessa had said, kneeling down to Emma's level in a move that seemed practiced. It's so nice to finally meet you. I'm Vanessa. My daddy says you're my birth mother, Emma had said matter-of-factly. How come I never met you before? Vanessa had glanced at Alex, clearly unprepared for such a direct question. Well, sometimes adults make mistakes, and I made some really big mistakes when you were a baby, but I'm here now, and I'd like to get to know you." "Okay," Emma had said with a shrug. "Do you want to push me on the swings?" And just like that, the first visit had begun. Alex had watched from a nearby bench, Rachel's hand in his, as Vanessa had pushed Emma on the swings and tried to make small talk with a 5-year-old who had no particular interest in her. Emma had been polite but distant, the way she was with strangers at the grocery store. She'd answered Vanessa's questions about school and her favorite books, but she'd kept glancing back at Alex and Rachel, checking to make sure they were still there. After 30 minutes, Emma had climbed off the swings and run back to Alex. "Can we go home now?" she'd asked, loud enough for Vanessa to hear. "I want to finish the puzzle we started." Vanessa's face had fallen, but she'd covered it quickly. "Maybe we can meet again soon?" she'd suggested. "Maybe," Emma had said, already distracted, reaching for Rachel's hand. They'd left Vanessa standing in the parking lot, and Alex had seen her wipe her eyes as they'd driven away. The second visit, 2 weeks later, had gone similarly. Emma had been friendly but unattached, more interested in the playground equipment than in Vanessa. She'd called her Vanessa instead of any maternal title, and when Vanessa had tried to correct her, "You can call me Mom if you want," Emma had simply said, "But I already have a mom," and pointed at Rachel. Alex had seen Vanessa's frustration growing. She'd imagined some emotional reunion, he realized. She'd thought Emma would be overjoyed to have her biological mother back, that their bond would be instant and undeniable. She hadn't considered that Emma was a whole person who'd been loved and cared for by other people for 5 years, people who'd actually shown up. By the third visit, Vanessa's patience had worn thin. They'd met at a different park this time, in Federal Way, halfway between Alex's house and wherever Vanessa was living now. Emma had been playing on the climbing structure when Vanessa had pulled Alex aside. "This isn't working," she'd said bluntly. "She doesn't see me as her mother. She's cold to me." "She's 5, Alex had said, "and she doesn't know you. What did you expect?" "I expected you to help," Vanessa had hissed, keeping her voice low so Emma wouldn't hear. "You could be encouraging her to bond with me, but instead, you and your little replacement family are freezing me out." Alex had felt his temper flare. "Rachel is not a replacement. She's Emma's mother in every way that matters. And we're not freezing you out. We're letting Emma decide for herself." "That's bullshit and you know it," Vanessa had shot back. "She's a child. She doesn't know what's best for her." "And you do? You, who left her in a parking lot? You, who didn't even check to see if she was alive for 5 years?" They'd both been getting louder, and Rachel had walked over quickly, placing herself between them. "This conversation is over," Rachel had said firmly. "Emma is watching, and we're not doing this in front of her." Vanessa had looked like she wanted to argue, but then she'd glanced over and seen Emma staring at them from the top of the slide, her small face worried. Vanessa had taken a breath and stepped back. "Fine," she'd said tightly, "but I want more time with her. Unsupervised time. I'm her mother, Alex. I have rights." "Actually," Alex had said, pulling out his phone, "you don't." He'd pulled up the scanned copy of the divorce decree his attorney had sent him. The relevant section had been highlighted. Petitioner waives all rights to custody, visitation, and decision-making authority regarding the minor child. "You signed this," Alex had said, showing her the screen. "You gave up your rights voluntarily. The only reason you're seeing Emma at all right now is because I'm allowing it. But that can end any time, Vanessa, and if you push me, it will." Vanessa had stared at the document on his phone, her face going pale. "You can't do this. I'll get a lawyer. I'll fight you." "Go ahead," Alex had said calmly. "My attorney would love to present a judge with 5 years of evidence showing complete abandonment. We have documented proof of every expense I've paid, every milestone you missed, every holiday that passed without a single card or phone call. You think a court is going to give you custody after that?" The look on Vanessa's face had been worth every sleepless night Alex had spent documenting everything. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Alex's situation. But Vanessa wasn't done. Alex had underestimated her desperation, or maybe her delusion that she deserved a second chance without consequences. 2 weeks after that confrontation, Alex had received a letter from an attorney in Seattle. Vanessa was petitioning the court for a modification of custody arrangements, claiming she'd been coerced into signing away her rights while in a vulnerable mental state. She was requesting joint custody and arguing that it was in Emma's best interest to have a relationship with her biological mother. Alex had immediately forwarded the letter to Patricia Wong, his attorney, who'd called him within an hour. "This is exactly what we expected," Patricia had said, her voice steady and professional. "She has no case, but that doesn't mean she won't try. We'll need to respond formally, and I'll need you to gather all those documents we discussed. Every single piece of evidence showing the abandonment." "I have it all," Alex had said. "Everything is organized in cloud storage." "Good, then we're going to bury her." The next 3 months had been a blur of legal proceedings. Vanessa had gotten herself a lawyer. Not a good one, Alex's attorney had noted. Probably someone working on a contingency fee who thought they could win a sympathetic hearing. And they'd filed motion after motion. They'd claimed Vanessa had suffered from undiagnosed postpartum depression when she'd left. They'd argued that Bradley had been emotionally abusive and had coerced her into abandoning Emma. They'd suggested that Alex had hidden Emma from Vanessa and prevented contact. Each claim had been demolished by evidence. Patricia had submitted the text message Vanessa had sent the night she'd left. "She's your problem now." No mention of mental health, just cruelty. They'd submitted phone records showing 0 attempts by Vanessa to contact Alex in 5 years. Not one call, not one text, until she'd hired that PI. They'd submitted financial records showing Vanessa had never paid a dime of child support, never contributed to Emma's care in any way. They'd submitted affidavits from Alex's mother, his sister, Emma's pediatrician, and Emma's preschool teacher, all testifying to Alex's excellent care of his daughter and Vanessa's complete absence. And then came the depositions. Alex had to sit across a table from Vanessa and her attorney and answer questions about the breakdown of his marriage, about that night at the gas station, about his finances in his current marriage, and his parenting. It had been excruciating, but he'd stayed calm and factual, just like Patricia had coached him. Vanessa's deposition had been a disaster for her case. Under oath, she'd been forced to admit she'd been having an affair with Bradley before she'd left Alex. She'd admitted that Bradley had told her he didn't want children around. She'd admitted she'd chosen to leave rather than end the relationship with Bradley. She'd admitted she'd made no attempt to contact Emma for 5 years, even after things with Bradley had ended. "And why did your relationship with Mr. Westmore end?" Patricia had asked during the deposition. Vanessa had shifted uncomfortably. He met someone else, someone younger. "So he left you, the same way you left your husband and infant daughter?" "Objection," Vanessa's attorney had interjected weakly. "Relevance? I'm establishing a pattern of Ms. James's decision-making when relationships become inconvenient," Patricia had said smoothly. The deposition had gone on for hours, and by the end, Vanessa had been in tears, her story full of holes and contradictions. But the most damning moment had come when Patricia had asked a simple question. "Ms. James, in the 5 years since you left Emma, how much money have you saved for her future? College fund? Anything like that?" Vanessa had hesitated. I was going through a difficult financial time." "That's not an answer. How much money have you saved or set aside for your daughter?" "None," Vanessa had finally admitted. "But I was planning to." No further questions. The court hearing had been scheduled for late February 2025. Alex had taken the day off work, worn his best suit, and sat in a King County courtroom while a judge reviewed the mountains of evidence Patricia had assembled. Vanessa had shown up with her attorney, wearing a conservative dress in minimal makeup, trying to look like a reformed woman who'd made mistakes but deserved forgiveness. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Marianne Foster, had read through everything with an expression that gave nothing away. Then she'd looked up at Vanessa. "Max James, I've reviewed your petition and all the evidence submitted by both parties. I'm going to be very direct with you. This is one of the clearest cases of voluntary abandonment I've seen in 20 years on the bench." Vanessa had started to speak, but Judge Foster had held up a hand. "You left your infant daughter at a gas station with her father and drove away. You sent a text message saying she was his problem. You made 0 attempts to contact your child for 5 years. You paid 0 child support. You didn't attend a single doctor's appointment, birthday party, or parent-teacher conference. You signed divorce papers that explicitly waived all your parental rights. And now you want to claim that you were coerced or mentally ill?" "Your Honor, I've changed," Vanessa had said, her voice breaking. "I made terrible mistakes, but I want to be part of my daughter's life now." "What you want is irrelevant," Judge Foster had said sharply. "What matters is what's best for the child. And based on everything I've seen, you have demonstrated no capacity for consistent, selfless parenting. Mr. James has provided excellent care for his daughter. She's thriving in a stable home with 2 parents who have shown up for her every single day. I see no compelling reason to disrupt that." Judge Foster had looked down at her papers and made a note. "The petition for modification of custody is denied. Furthermore, I'm granting Mr. James's counter-petition to terminate your parental rights entirely. You will have no legal claim to this child." Vanessa had made a sound like she'd been punched. "Your Honor, please," her attorney had begun. "My decision is final," Judge Foster had said. "Miss James, you made your choice 5 years ago when you abandoned your daughter. You don't get to unmake it now because things didn't work out the way you'd hoped. This hearing is adjourned." Alex had sat there in stunned silence as the judge had left the courtroom. It was over. Vanessa had no claim to Emma. His daughter was safe. He'd looked over at Vanessa, who'd been sitting at the other table with tears streaming down her face. For a moment, just a moment, he'd felt a flash of pity. She'd destroyed her own life with her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. But then he'd thought about that night at the gas station, about the hundreds of nights he'd stayed up alone with a crying baby, about the birthday parties and first words and scraped knees that Vanessa had chosen to miss. And the pity had evaporated. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. After the hearing, Alex had taken Rachel out to dinner at a nice restaurant in Tacoma, Anthony's, overlooking the water. They'd gotten a table by the window and ordered the good wine, the kind Alex normally would have said was too expensive. But that night, nothing felt too expensive. "It's really over," Rachel had said, raising her glass. "She can't hurt Emma anymore." "She can't," Alex had agreed, clinking his glass against hers. "Emma's ours. Legally, finally, completely ours." They'd sat there watching the lights reflect off the Puget Sound, and Alex had felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. But the story wasn't quite finished yet. 3 months later, in May 2025, Alex's phone had buzzed with an unknown number. He'd almost ignored it, probably spam, but something had made him answer. "Hello? Alex James?" An unfamiliar woman's voice. "Speaking. My name is Jennifer Hartwell. I'm a social worker with the State of Oregon Department of Human Services. I'm calling about Vanessa James." Alex's stomach had dropped. "What about her?" "Ms. James listed you as an emergency contact on some paperwork, though I understand you're no longer married. I'm calling to inform you that she's been hospitalized following a suicide attempt. She's stable now, but she's asking if she can speak with you." Alex had felt like he'd been hit by a truck. A suicide attempt? Yes, she was found by a neighbor and brought to Portland General Hospital. She's receiving mental health treatment now, but she specifically requested that someone contact you. Alex had closed his eyes. Even now, even after everything, Vanessa was pulling him back into her orbit. "I don't think that's a good idea," he'd said carefully, We're not in contact anymore." "I understand," Jennifer had said sympathetically. "I just needed to pass along the message. If you change your mind, here's my number." Alex had hung up and sat in his car in the warehouse parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. He'd told Rachel about the call that evening. She'd listened quietly, then asked the question he'd been asking himself all afternoon. "Do you want to go see her?" "No," Alex had said immediately. Then more honestly, "I don't know. Part of me thinks she's exactly where she belongs, dealing with the consequences of her choices. But another part of me feels bad," Rachel had finished, "because you're a good person who doesn't like seeing people suffer, even people who hurt you." "Is that stupid?" "No," Rachel had said. "It's human. But you don't owe her anything, Alex. You especially don't owe her your emotional energy or your peace of mind. She made her choices. You're not responsible for saving her from them." Alex had thought about it for 2 more days. Then he'd made a decision. He'd driven to Portland on a Saturday, alone. Rachel had offered to come, but he'd wanted to do this by himself. He'd needed to close this chapter of his life on his own terms. The hospital room had been sterile and white, and Vanessa had looked small in the bed, hooked up to IVs and monitors. She'd looked up when he'd walked in, and something in her expression had crumbled. "You came," she'd whispered. "I came," Alex had said, staying near the door. "But I'm not staying long. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm not okay," Vanessa had said, tears starting to fall. "I've ruined everything, Alex. Everything. I lost you. I lost Emma. I lost every good thing I ever had. And I can't get any of it back." "No," Alex had agreed quietly. "You can't." "I'm so sorry," she'd sobbed. "I'm so sorry for what I did. For leaving you both. For being such a terrible person. I don't know how to live with it." Alex had stood there, watching this woman who'd once been his whole world fall apart, and he'd felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity anymore. Just a kind of distant sadness for all the wasted years and broken promises. "Vanessa," he'd said gently, "you can't go back and unmake your choices. None of us can. But you can decide who you want to be from this point forward. You can get help. You can work on yourself. You can try to become someone you're proud of. Not for me, not for Emma, for yourself." "How?" Vanessa had asked, her voice broken. "How do I do that?" "That's something you have to figure out on your own," Alex had said. "But I can tell you this. Staying focused on what you lost isn't going to help you. The only way forward is to actually move forward." They'd talked for another 20 minutes. Alex had told her about Emma, carefully without details, but enough to let Vanessa know that her daughter was happy and loved and thriving. He'd told her that he hoped she'd get better, that he didn't wish her harm, but that she couldn't be part of their lives. "I understand," Vanessa had said quietly. "Thank you for coming. You didn't have to." "No," Alex had agreed. "I didn't." He'd left the hospital feeling lighter somehow. He'd said what he'd needed to say, seen what he'd needed to see. Whatever happened to Vanessa now was her own responsibility. He'd driven home to Spanaway, to the house where his wife and daughter were waiting, and he'd let it all go. The years that followed were good ones. Alex got promoted again in 2026, this time to Director of Logistics Operations, with a salary of $95,000, more money than he'd ever imagined making back in those desperate days living in his mother's basement. Rachel's career at the tech company flourished, and they'd been able to refinance their house and build out a proper playroom for Emma. Emma herself had grown into a bright, confident 7-year-old who loved reading and soccer and asking approximately 8 million questions a day. She'd started calling Rachel Mom without any prompting, and when her 2nd grade class had done a family tree project, she'd drawn Alex, Rachel, her grandmother Linda, her Aunt June, and her cousins without a second thought. That was her family. Those were the people who showed up. Vanessa had become a distant memory, someone who occasionally crossed Alex's mind, but no longer carried any emotional weight. He'd heard through the grapevine his former mother-in-law had reached out once, trying to guilt him into letting Vanessa see Emma, that she'd moved back to Seattle and was working as a receptionist somewhere. She'd apparently gotten treatment after the hospitalization and was doing better. Alex was glad for her, in an abstract way, but he had no desire to reconnect. His life was full without her in it. Then came November 2029. It was a regular Saturday, nothing special planned. Alex and Rachel had taken Emma to the Costco in Lakewood to stock up on groceries and grab lunch at the food court, one of Emma's favorite weekend activities because she loved their pizza. They'd filled their cart with the usual suburban staples: bulk cereal, a rotisserie chicken, enough LaCroix to supply a small army. They'd been in the checkout line, Emma chattering about her upcoming soccer tournament, when Alex had heard someone say his name. Alex? Alex James? He turned around and found himself face to face with Bradley Westmore. The man looked older, he'd be pushing 55 now, with distinguished gray at his temples and designer glasses that probably cost more than Alex's monthly grocery budget. He was wearing expensive casual wear, the kind of artfully distressed jeans and cashmere sweater that only wealthy people could pull off. And he had his arm around a woman who looked to be in her mid-30s, blonde and polished. "Bradley," Alex had said, surprise making his voice come out flat. "It's been a while." 10 years at least, Bradley had said with that easy smile of someone who'd never really faced consequences for anything. "I almost didn't recognize you. You look great, man. Really great." Alex had been acutely aware of Rachel standing beside him, her hand tightening slightly on the shopping cart handle. Emma had stopped talking and was looking up at this stranger with curious eyes. "This is my wife, Tiffany," Bradley had continued, gesturing to the blonde woman. "And this is, I'm sorry, I don't think I know your wife's name." "Rachel," Alex had said shortly, "and this is our daughter, Emma." Bradley's eyes had flicked to Emma, and something had crossed his face. Recognition, maybe, or guilt. He'd known who Emma was, Alex realized. He'd known about the baby Vanessa had abandoned to be with him. "Beautiful family," Bradley had said, and it had sounded genuine, which somehow made it worse. "Are you still in Seattle?" "Tacoma area," Alex had said, not offering more details. "We're in Bellevue," Tiffany had chimed in, her voice bright and oblivious. "Bradley just made partner at his firm. We're celebrating with a kitchen renovation. Did you see those Italian marble countertops by the entrance? We're thinking of doing something similar." Alex had felt Rachel's hand on his arm, a gentle reminder to keep his cool. "Congratulations," he'd said to Bradley. "Sounds like things worked out well for you." There had been a beat of awkward silence. Bradley had shifted his weight, and for the first time, he'd looked uncomfortable. "Listen, Alex," he'd said, lowering his voice slightly. "I know this is random, but I actually wanted to reach out to you a while back. About what happened with Vanessa." Alex had felt his jaw tighten. "What about it?" "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Bradley had said. "For my part in it, I mean. The whole situation was messy, and I didn't handle it well. I was going through my own stuff with my divorce, and I wasn't thinking clearly about the impact on other people, specifically on you and your kid." Emma had tugged on Alex's hand. "Daddy, can we get the pizza now?" "In a minute, sweetheart," Alex had said, then looked back at Bradley. "You're apologizing for having an affair with my wife?" "For how it went down," Bradley had said. "Look, I'm not proud of how I acted back then. I was selfish. I told Vanessa I didn't want kids around, and I know that put her in an impossible position. If I'd handled it differently, maybe she wouldn't have made the choices she made." Alex had wanted to laugh. The man was actually trying to absolve himself by suggesting he was somehow responsible for Vanessa's choices. "Bradley," Alex had said slowly, "Vanessa left our 6-month-old daughter at a gas station in the rain. She texted me that Emma was my problem now and drove away. She didn't make those choices because of anything you did. She made them because that's who she was. She chose her own comfort over her child's welfare. That's on her, not you. Bradley had looked genuinely taken aback. I didn't know it happened like that. She told me it was more of a mutual decision, that you'd agreed she needed space. She lied to you, Alex had said flatly, which shouldn't surprise either of us, given how your relationship started. Tiffany had been looking increasingly uncomfortable, clearly regretting being present for this conversation. She touched Bradley's arm. Honey, maybe we should... How is Vanessa? Alex had asked, surprising himself. Do you know? Bradley had shaken his head. We haven't spoken in years. Last I heard she was back in Seattle somewhere, but that's all I know. After we broke up, she went off the radar for a while. She tried to get custody of Emma, Alex had said. Few years back, lost in court, judge terminated her parental rights entirely. Bradley had winced. Jesus, I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be, Alex had said. It was the best thing for Emma. She's got two parents who love her and show up for her every single day. She doesn't need someone who's going to drift in and out whenever it's convenient. There had been another awkward pause. Then Bradley had extended his hand. For what it's worth, Alex, I'm glad things worked out for you. You seem like you built a good life. Alex had shaken his hand briefly. I have. No thanks to you or Vanessa. They'd parted ways, and Alex had stood there for a moment, processing the encounter, before Emma had tugged his hand again. Daddy, pizza? Yeah, kiddo, let's get pizza. They'd gotten their food and sat at one of those high tables in the Costco food court, Emma working her way through a slice almost as big as her face. Rachel had waited until Emma was distracted before leaning over. You okay? She'd asked quietly. Yeah, Alex had said, and he'd been surprised to find it was true. Running into him was weird, but it doesn't really matter anymore. That whole part of my life feels like it happened to someone else. It did, in a way, Rachel had said. You're not the same person you were then. She'd been right. The Alex who'd stood in that gas station parking lot 10 years ago, broken and terrified and alone, was gone. He'd been replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd fought for his daughter and won, someone who'd built a real life from nothing. But the universe apparently wasn't done throwing curveballs his way. 2 weeks after the Costco encounter, Alex had been at work when he'd gotten a call from an unknown number. Normally, he'd let it go to voicemail, but something had made him answer. Mr. James, this is Detective Sarah Park with the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling about Vanessa James. I understand she's your ex-wife? Alex's heart had started pounding. What happened? Is she okay? She's fine, Detective Park had said quickly, but she's been the victim of a crime, and your name came up during our investigation. Would you be able to come down to the station to answer some questions? Alex had driven to Seattle that afternoon, his mind racing with possibilities. What kind of crime? Why did they need to talk to him? He'd had zero contact with Vanessa in years. The police station had been exactly like what he'd expected. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, the smell of bad coffee. Detective Park had been a woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd led him to an interview room and offered him coffee, which he'd declined. Mr. James, thank you for coming in, she'd begun. I want to stress that you're not in any trouble. We're investigating a case of financial fraud, and Vanessa James is one of the victims. Your name came up in her financial records, and we needed to verify some information. Financial fraud? Alex had been confused. What does that have to do with me? Ms. James was involved with a man named Richard Delacroix for the past 2 years, Detective Park had explained. Mr. Delacroix ran what we believe was a romance scam. He targeted women online, built relationships with them, and then convinced them to invest in fake business opportunities. He scammed at least 15 women out of a combined $300,000. Alex had felt a wash of second-hand embarrassment. Vanessa had fallen for a scam artist. In Ms. James's case, Detective Park had continued, She gave him approximately $42,000 over the course of their relationship. She also took out credit cards in her name at his request, which he maxed out. She's currently about $70,000 in debt. Jesus, Alex had muttered. During our investigation, we found documents in Mr. Delacroix's possession that had your name on them. Specifically, documents related to your daughter Emma, birth certificate, custody papers, that sort of thing. Can you tell me how he would have gotten those? Alex had felt a cold anger rising. Vanessa gave him my daughter's personal information? It appears so, Detective Park had said carefully. We're not sure why. He claimed he was helping Ms. James with a custody case, though obviously there was no active case. We think he may have been planning to attempt some kind of identity theft or fraud using the child's information, but we caught him before anything happened. Alex had clenched his fists under the table. Where is this guy now? In custody, facing multiple charges. He'll likely be going to prison for a long time. But I need to ask you, Mr. James, when was the last time you had contact with Vanessa James? Alex had told her everything. The gas station abandonment, the court case, the termination of parental rights, the brief hospital visit, and then nothing for years. He'd explained that Vanessa had no legal claim to Emma and shouldn't have had access to any documents related to her. Detective Park had taken notes throughout, nodding occasionally. It seems like Miss James kept copies of documents from before the court terminated her rights, she'd said. Technically not illegal, since they were hers at one point, but definitely concerning that she shared them with someone who was clearly a criminal. I'd recommend you put a credit freeze on your daughter's social security number, just to be safe, and document this incident in case there are future custody issues. Alex had left the police station feeling shaken. Even years later, even after losing all legal rights to Emma, Vanessa was still making decisions that could have harmed their daughter. She'd given a con artist access to Emma's personal information, all in pursuit of, what? Another relationship with another man who'd promised her something better? Some people never learned. He'd driven home and explained everything to Rachel. They'd immediately frozen Emma's credit and filed all the police reports. Emma herself had been oblivious to the whole thing. She'd been more interested in showing Alex the A she'd gotten on her spelling test. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Alex and Rachel had sat on their back porch with glasses of wine, looking out at their small yard where Emma's soccer ball sat abandoned by the fence. Do you think she'll ever stop? Rachel had asked quietly. Vanessa, I mean. Will she ever just move on and leave us alone? I don't know, Alex had said honestly. Part of me thinks she's just broken in some fundamental way. She keeps chasing these fantasies of what her life should be, and every time reality doesn't match up, she makes worse and worse decisions. Do you feel bad for her? Alex had thought about it. Sometimes, but mostly I just feel tired. Tired of her being this dark cloud that occasionally rolls back into our lives. Tired of having to be vigilant and protective because she might do something stupid that affects Emma. She can't hurt Emma now, Rachel had reminded him. Not legally, and Emma doesn't even remember her. That had been true. Emma had no memory of Vanessa, no attachment, no curiosity even. When the topic of biological mothers came up, usually from well-meaning but nosy people who asked invasive questions, Emma would shrug and say, I have a mom. Her name is Rachel. End of discussion. 6 months later, in May 2030, Alex had gotten one final communication from Vanessa. It had been a letter, handwritten, forwarded to him by his attorney because Vanessa had sent it to Patricia Wong's office. Patricia had called him first to ask if he wanted to read it or just shred it. What does it say? Alex had asked. It's an apology letter, Patricia had said. Pretty long, lots of regrets and acknowledgments of her mistakes. No request for contact, no legal maneuvering, just an apology. Send it to me, Alex had decided. I'll read it. The letter had arrived 2 days later. Alex had waited until he was alone to open it, sitting in his car during his lunch break. Dear Alex, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. I definitely don't expect you to forgive me. But my therapist says I need to try to make amends to the people I've hurt, even if those amends aren't accepted. So here I am. I've spent the last year in intensive therapy, working through why I make the choices I make. I've been diagnosed with several things: borderline personality disorder, attachment issues stemming from my childhood, a pattern of self-sabotage that keeps repeating. None of these diagnoses excuse what I did to you and Emma. They just help explain it. I abandoned my daughter at a gas station. I drove away from my baby because I thought a man who I barely knew could give me a better life than the one I had with you. I was selfish, delusional, and cruel. There's no other way to say it. You were a good husband. You worked hard. You were faithful. You tried your best to make me happy. I repaid that by betraying you in the worst possible way. You were a good father. You are a good father. Emma is lucky to have you. I know I lost the custody case. I know my rights were terminated. I know that Emma doesn't know me and doesn't need me in her life. I'm not writing this to try to change any of that. I'm writing because you deserve to hear me say that I was wrong about everything. You told me once, at the hospital, that I needed to become someone I could be proud of. You were right. I'm trying. I'm working a regular job, going to therapy twice a week, staying away from men who promise me the world. I'm learning to be okay with an ordinary life. It's harder than I thought it would be. I got scammed recently, lost a lot of money, got into a lot of debt. I almost let it destroy me, but instead I'm using it as a wake-up call. I'm done chasing fantasy lives with fantasy people. I'm done hurting people in pursuit of something that doesn't exist. I hope Emma is happy. I hope she's surrounded by people who love her. I hope she never knows what it's like to have a mother who abandoned her. If Rachel is good to her, then I'm grateful. Emma deserves a mother who shows up. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now what I couldn't see then. I had everything, and I threw it away. That's on me, no one else. I'm sorry, Alex, for everything. Vanessa. Alex had sat in his car for a long time after reading the letter, watching people come and go from the warehouse loading docks. He'd felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at all the wasted years, sadness for the family that could have been, relief that Emma had been spared growing up with someone so unstable. But mostly, he'd felt closure. Vanessa had finally admitted what he'd needed to hear, that none of it had been his fault, that he'd been enough, that he'd done his best, that her choices had been hers alone. He'd folded the letter carefully and put it in his glove compartment. He hadn't responded, and he never would. But knowing that Vanessa finally understood what she'd done, what she'd lost, that was enough. That weekend, Alex and Rachel had taken Emma to Point Defiance Park, the same place where Alex had proposed to Rachel all those years ago. Emma had run ahead on the trail, her ponytail bouncing, shouting back to them about a squirrel she'd spotted. Rachel had slipped her hand into Alex's. "You've been quiet the last few days. Everything okay?" "Yeah," Alex had said, and he'd meant it. "Everything's okay. Better than okay, actually." The letter from Vanessa? It helped, Alex had admitted. Not in the way you might think, but it closed a door I didn't realize was still slightly open. They'd watched Emma chase the squirrel, her laughter echoing through the trees. "You know what I realized?" Alex had said. "That night at the gas station, when Vanessa left me there with Emma, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd hit rock bottom and would never recover. But that moment was actually when my real life began. Everything good I have now, you, this family, my career, even just knowing who I am, it all grew from that moment." "Sounds like you're making peace with it," Rachel had said. "I am," Alex had agreed, "because I finally understand that Vanessa leaving wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened to Emma." Emma had run back to them, breathless and excited, demanding they come see the squirrel's nest she'd found. Alex had scooped her up, making her shriek with laughter, and carried her on his shoulders to see the discovery. In that moment, walking through the park with his daughter on his shoulders and his wife by his side, Alex James felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete gratitude for exactly how his life had turned out. Because here's what he'd learned through all of it. The abandonment, the struggle, the legal battles, the confrontations with the past. Sometimes the people who walk away from you are doing you the greatest favor of your life. They're removing themselves so that the right people can find you. They're clearing the path for the family you're meant to have. Vanessa had left because she was chasing a fantasy. But in leaving, she'd made room for someone real. Someone who stayed. Someone who showed up every single day through tantrums and doctor's appointments and soccer games and homework struggles and all the beautiful, mundane moments that make up a real family. Emma would grow up knowing she was chosen, not just by Alex, who'd fought like hell to keep her, but by Rachel, who'd chosen to love a child who wasn't biologically hers, but was hers in every way that mattered. That was the real victory. Not the court case, not Vanessa's apology, not even the successful career Alex had built. The victory was the 8-year-old girl on his shoulders who felt secure and loved and happy, who would never know what it felt like to wonder if she was wanted. As they walked back to the car, Emma chattering about squirrels and acorns and could they please get ice cream, Alex caught Rachel's eye and smiled. She smiled back, and in that smile was everything they'd built together. Trust, partnership, family. Some people spend their whole lives chasing what they think they deserve. Alex had learned to be grateful for what he'd earned, not through luck or circumstance, but through showing up day after day and doing the hard work of being a good father and a good partner. That night, after Emma had been tucked into bed with Mr. Hopscotch and 3 stories read, Alex had sat down at his computer and written his own letter. Not to Vanessa, she didn't deserve his words anymore, but to himself. To the younger Alex who'd stood in that gas station parking lot, terrified and alone. It gets better, he'd written. The pain fades, the fear fades. What remains is strength you didn't know you had, and love you didn't know you deserved. You're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to build something beautiful from the ruins. The woman who left you did you a favor, though it won't feel like it for a long time. She removed herself from Emma's life, and in doing so, she made room for someone better. Someone who will love your daughter like her own. Someone who will love you the way you deserve to be loved. Keep going. Keep showing up. Keep fighting for your daughter. It's worth it. Trust me. I know. He'd saved the letter in a folder on his computer, dated May 15, 2030. Maybe one day, when Emma was older and had questions about her biological mother, he'd share it with her. Or maybe he'd just keep it for himself, a reminder of how far he'd come. Either way, it was the final punctuation mark on that chapter of his life. The next morning, Alex had woken up to Emma jumping on his bed, announcing that she'd lost her first tooth and the tooth fairy owed her money. Rachel had laughed and pulled her under the covers for a tickle fight, and Alex had joined in. And for a few perfect minutes, their bedroom had been full of nothing but laughter and love. This was his life now. This was his family, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting people face the consequences of their own actions while you build a better life than they ever imagined you could. Alex didn't win because Vanessa lost. He won because he chose, every single day, to show up for the people who mattered. He won because he transformed his rock bottom into a foundation. The people who abandon you are not the ones who define your worth. The people who stay, the ones who choose you when it's hard, who love you when it's inconvenient, who show up when it's unglamorous. Those are the people who reveal your true value. And if you're very lucky, you become one of those people too. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.